Hey, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Ivy, and today I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know to read Chain of Iron. This is by no means like an official thing or an expert thing. I am just trying to bring a bunch of information in that you might want to know before you read Chain of Iron. First of all, Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare is part of the Shadowhunters Chronicles, and it's the second book in the Last Hours trilogy, which takes place right around the first few years of the 1900s. The first book is called Chain of Gold. It's this one right here. I was gonna try to hold this up while I talk, but it's way too heavy, so we're just gonna put it down. Spoiler warnings for the following books: the Infernal Devices trilogy, Chain of Gold, obviously, The Midnight Air from the Bane Chronicles, Nothing But Shadows from Tales of the Shadowhunter Academy, Cast Long Shadows, Every Exquisite Thing, and Learn About Loss from Ghosts of the Shadow Market, and a very minor spoiler from The Lost Book of the White. The first thing you need to know is Heron Greystairs. It's been a while since you read The Infernal Devices. I'm just gonna catch you up a little bit. Tessa Gray, who is the warlock shapeshifter main character of that series, Will Herondale, who's just a normal Shadowhunter, but he's awesome, and then Jem Carstairs, who is now known as Brother Zachariah since he became a silent brother. The kids in The Last Hours, though, call him Uncle Jem. Basically, as I'm sure you remember, in The Infernal Devices, there's an epic love triangle between these three people, and Tessa is in love with both of them, and Will and Jem are parabati, so they're super close, and it's just love all around. Currently, as I said, Jem is Brother Zachariah, so he's in the Silent Brotherhood, and Tessa and Will are married. So now I'm gonna do kind of like a who's who to get you up to speed on the characters and all like the family relationships and stuff. There's so many, it is so hard to keep it all straight, but here we go. I'm gonna do my best. Cordelia and Alistair Carstairs are the children of Elias and Sona Carstairs. Cordelia is going to be parabati with Lucy Herondale. James and Lucy Herondale are Will and Tessa's children. James and Matthew Fairchild are parabati. Matthew and Charles Fairchild are Charlotte and Henry's children. Thomas, Barbara, and Eugenia Lightwood, who are the kids of Gideon and Sophie. Thomas is super close with his cousin Christopher Lightwood. Christopher, Anna, and Alexander Lightwood are the kids of Cecily and Gabriel. Then we have Grace Blackthorne, whose actual, biological name is Grace Cartwright, but she is Tatiana Blackthorne's ward. Jesse Blackthorne is Tatiana's son, but he's dead. Tatiana Blackthorne is Gideon and Gabriel's crazy sister. And then Cortana, the famous Carstairs sword, who is in Cordelia's possession at this point in time. You should also know that James, Matthew, Thomas, and Christopher are known as the Merry Thieves because they're super close and they're always getting into trouble. The four of them really bonded when they went to the Shadowhunter Academy together. Chain of Gold starts out with Cordelia, Alistair, and Sona moving to London because Elias has been accused of a crime and he's in the custody of the Clave. Once they are in London, some really strange demon attacks start happening, and it's really weird because everything has been quiet for so long. There haven't really been demon attacks in recent years. It gets really complicated and intricate, and there's just so much going on, so I decided to kind of break it down by character. It's gonna be all over the place. I hope you're ready for this. Let's start with Cordelia. So Cordelia's whole thing in Chain of Gold is that she really just wants to help her family get their reputation back after Elias has been accused of this crime, and she also just wants to fit into the London social scene. Cordelia is head over heels in love with James, and because of that, at the end of Chain of Iron, she sacrifices her reputation to save his butt. James was accused by Tatiana of destroying Blackthorne Manor, and Cordelia gives him an alibi because she says, he couldn't have destroyed it because he was with me all night, and that, of course, ruins her reputation. Because Cordelia sacrifices her reputation to save him, James and Cordelia enter a fake engagement. So basically, they're going to be married for, well, they're not going to be married. They're actually going to get married for a year, but they're saying that it's fake because James doesn't think that he actually loves Cordelia, and Cordelia has agreed to it because, you know, she needs to salvage her reputation, and she knows, or she thinks, that James will never love her back. So James Herondale, we know that he had a really tough time at the academy where he was bullied and also expelled because of his powers. His powers basically allow him to pass into the shadow realm and become a shadow, which is very interesting, and he has been training with Jem to figure out how to master this weird power that he has. That power comes from his grandfather, Belial, who is a prince of hell, but we will talk about that later. In January of 1903, Magnus encounters James, and James is in a really bad spot. He's getting really drunk, he's causing all sorts of trouble, he is not taking very good care of himself, and we can infer that this is because of Grace. James, as far as we can tell, is actually in love with Cordelia. He just doesn't quite realize it because he's being enthralled by Grace. Grace Blackthorne has some really weird siren powers going on. We see this with James, obviously, throughout the book, even though it's on and off as he kind of goes back and forth between Grace and Cordelia, but obviously ultimately ends up in love with Grace, but in this fake marriage thing with Cordelia. We also see Grace's siren powers when she forces Matthew to kiss her, and he has no control and he's forced to, so there's something really strange going on with this girl. It is not clear what her relationship with Tatiana really is. It seems kind of like they're working together, but they could each have their own separate agendas. We just don't know at this point. The silver bracelet, or the voodoo bracelet as I like to call it, puts James under her spell. So this bracelet that she gives him, anytime he's wearing it, as far as I can tell, makes the spell that's keeping him in love with her even stronger. The bracelet was also supposed to prepare James for Belial, so I guess Belial gave the bracelet to Grace and Tatiana to use on James. Something that is interesting, though, is that partway through Chain of Gold, Grace takes the bracelet off of him, but then she puts it back on at the end, and he goes back into thinking that he's in love with her. Grace claims to not be trained, but we have very good reason to believe that she knows how to fight and she's just hiding it. In the Midnight Air, we see Magnus going to London in 1903 and he encounters Grace Blackthorne. He offers to try to help get her away from Tatiana and away from this whole situation, and in response, Grace holds him at knife point and threatens him. Obviously, there is much more to Grace than meets the eye. She also tells Matthew, when she forces him to kiss her, that she has never cared about anyone in her life besides her brother, so she does not feel any affection or attachment to a single living soul. Grace is currently engaged to Charles Fairchild because he wants power and he sees being engaged to her as a way to get more power, and it's really not clear why she agreed to this. On the family tree that is in the book jacket of Clockwork Princess, which Cassandra Clare has said may or may not be reliable, on that family tree it says that Grace Blackthorne is married to Christopher Lightwood, Belial. Belial is one of the 9 princes of hell, and specifically he is known as the Thief of Realms, and also some other things, but that's kind of the most relevant. As I mentioned earlier, he is James and Lucy's grandfather, which means he's Tessa's father. All along, Belial was behind all the demon attacks and the disease that has been caused by those attacks. His agenda is to possess James so that he can go into the human world. All along, the attacks and the sickness were meant to bring James to him so that this possession could happen. It doesn't end up happening in this book because Cordelia, stab. Belial created Tessa with the intention to possess her, but he never could because Ithuriel, the clockwork angel that she always wore, protected her from him. Something that's very interesting is he can only possess someone of his own blood, so that's Tessa, James, or Lucy as of now. Something interesting is that he very briefly at the end of the book mentions to Tatiana that he has an anchor on Earth, and it hasn't been said who or what that anchor is, but of course I'm sure lots of people have theories. We also know that in 2010, Belial is around because at the end of the Lost Book of the White, he shows up to something. That's all I'm gonna say. Tatiana Blackthorne is a basket case. She is still holding a grudge against the Infernal Devices crew because of what happened to her father and brother. She blames her brothers and Will and Cecily and all those people for what happened when, you know, Benedict Lightwood got demon pox, turned into a demon, and killed her husband. In January of 1903, she tries to hire Magnus to kill 5 Shadowhunters and also bring Jesse back from the dead. Of course, Magnus refuses, but this is just more and more evidence that she is insane and evil. We know that she's been making some super shady deals trying to bring Jesse Blackthorne back from the dead. One of those shady deals happens to be with our best friend Belial. The deal is that Tatiana will deliver James Herondale to Belial, and in exchange, Belial will help her get her revenge. At the end of Chain of Gold, Tatiana has been caught and she's being sent to the Adamant Citadel to become an Iron Sister, but we know that that is all part of Belial's plan so that he has someone on the inside in the Citadel where they make all the weapons. So Jesse Blackthorne, I keep mentioning him and I just need to talk about him. Jesse is a ghost, but he's not like other ghosts. He is much more material. I'm pretty sure he can be touched and he can pick stuff up, maybe. The only thing is, Lucy Herondale, Grace, and Tatiana are the only people who can see him. Jesse died when he was 16, I want to say, maybe younger, I don't know, but he died when he was given his first rune. Jesse has a locket that has his last breath inside of it, which in theory can bring him back from the dead, or at least help bring him back. When James comes back from the Shadow Realm at the end of this book, Jesse gives his last breath to James to save his life. This doesn't mean that Jesse is gone, like Jesse's still around, it just means that his possibly the last chance of him coming back from the dead has been eliminated. At the end of Chain of Gold, it looks like Grace and Lucy are going to try to work together to bring Jesse back. The family tree that I mentioned earlier has Lucy and Jesse getting married and continuing the Blackthorne line, which leads down to the Blackthorns that we know and love from the Dark Artifices, which is very interesting again because Jesse is not living. Lucy Herondale is a writer. She loves to write. She's been writing this story about Cordelia, going on all these adventures. It's a fun time. Something very interesting about Lucy is that she has the power to see ghosts, but also control them. Like, she is very powerful when it comes to ghosts, and this is her power that she got from her greater demon grandfather. Then we have Matthew Fairchild. This is such a mess. In the story called Nothing But Shadows, which is in Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy, we know that Matthew really has a lot going on. He confesses to James that he wants to get kicked out of the academy so that he can go home and be there to take care of Henry, his father, because Henry is such a mess and will probably end up dying in an explosion of his own making. In the story called Cast Along Shadows, which is in Ghosts of the Shadow Market, we see at the Academy in 1899 that Alistair Carstairs starts a rumor about Matthew. The rumor is that Matthew's real dad isn't Henry, it's Gideon Lightwood. This does some serious damage to Matthew's mental health because in London in 1901, he goes to a shadow market and he buys a potion from a fairy. Matthew thinks that the potion is a truth potion and he gives it to Charlotte with the intent of finding out the truth behind his birth. The potion is not a truth potion and it ends up poisoning Charlotte and killing her unborn child. Brother Zachariah knows about this, he knows what happened, but he is not going to tell anyone, and neither will Matthew. He is keeping this huge secret all to himself. Flash forward to 1903, which is when Chain of Gold and Chain of Iron take place, I think, Matthew is an alcoholic. He is drinking and drinking and drinking because he cannot deal with what he has done. The mistake that he made will haunt him forever, and he is in a really, really, really bad place. However, there is a bit of hope, because at the end of Chain of Gold, Magnus Bane has showed up, and at the engagement party for James and Cordelia, Magnus decides that he is going to try to help Matthew. So if Magnus is here, maybe everything will be okay. Matthew possibly has a crush on Lucy, but he also might have a crush on Cordelia. It's all very confusing. Alistair Carstairs, as I mentioned, was a bully at the academy. He has done some pretty crappy stuff. Specifically in the story called Nothing But Shadows from Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy, we learn that Alistair is partly responsible for why James gets expelled. Alistair is starting to regret everything that he's done and how poorly he's treated some of these people, and he is starting to try to make up for it and change his ways. He is also queer. I'm not sure if he is gay or bisexual or something else, but he is closeted. No one knows except Cordelia, who eavesdropped on him and knows about it now. He had a relationship with Charles Fairchild, which was very toxic, but at the end of Chain of Gold, he finally breaks it off with him, saying, you know what, I'm too good for you, I don't deserve this grossness that was happening. That brings me to Thomas Lightwood. In Chain of Gold, Thomas really comes into his own by helping find the antidote for these demon sickness things that are happening. We also see Thomas having some super conflicting feelings about Alistair because Thomas has a crush on him. Thomas and Alistair had like a very brief romp through Paris in which some sparks definitely flew, and Thomas definitely still has feelings for Alistair, but it's not clear where Alistair is on this. So Barbara Lightwood, who is Sophie and Gideon's daughter and Christopher's sister, was killed in one of the demon attacks. So we saw some grieving of our characters. I'm sure we will see more in the next book. Christopher Lightwood, who is an adorable mess of a genius, was also wounded in a demon attack, and he got super, super sick, but he is okay because Thomas and I think some other people, but I can't remember now, they figured out the antidote and saved everyone who was still alive but sick. Anna Lightwood, who's Christopher's older sister, oh my gosh, I love her so much. In the story called Every Exquisite Thing from Ghosts of the Shadow Market, we learn that Anna has a brief but very intense love affair with Ariadne Bridgestock. We don't know much about Ariadne yet, but I have a feeling she's going to play a bigger part in Chain of Iron. Ariadne dumps Anna after this really brief and intense thing that they have because she wants to please her family and she's going to be engaged to Charles Fairchild. However, when Ariadne is in a coma after being attacked by the demons, Charles dumps her. Once Ariadne is back, awake and well, she tells Anna that she is going to make it up to her, and Anna is skeptical, but I have a feeling they're gonna end up together. So Cortana, we see Cortana a lot in this book because obviously Cordelia is wielding her at this point. Something interesting is that James is able to follow the light of Cortana through the Shadow Realm to get from the Institute to Chiswick, I want to say. The other thing is, of course, that Cordelia uses Cortana to stab and wound Belial, but we know that that's not going to keep him down for long. Elias Carstairs, who is Alistair and Cordelia's father, we find out he is an alcoholic. Cordelia never knew her whole childhood, and she's just now finding out, and all of the pieces of her, her life leading up to this are falling into place. But Elias has been released because he was in custody, but now he's released, and so I guess that means he's gonna come back into the picture in Chain of Iron. We also have a very, very, very interesting nugget about Jem, or Brother Zachariah. I guess he's Brother Zachariah at this point. In a story called Learn About Loss, which is in Ghosts of the Shadow Market, we learn that Belial owes a debt to Jem. We don't know why, we don't know what led to this debt being owed, but something tells me we are going to find out, and I feel like we just need to keep that in the back of our heads. Why does a prince of hell owe Jem Carstairs a debt? This is what's keeping me up at night. Lastly, I just have like 2 strange things that I noticed that probably are of no importance, but I just thought I would mention them. In the scene where Lucy goes to Chiswick to try to talk to Jessie, it briefly, and when I say briefly, I mean briefly, mentions that she sees a young blonde man who looks familiar to her. And that's it. Like, it was just one-off, it was there, and then it wasn't, and I was like, what just happened? Is this important? Is this going to come back? I don't know. We'll have to see. The other thing that I just found interesting was that Charles Fairchild, at one point, when James and Cordelia and Matthew, I want to say, when they're all at the Hell Ruelle, Charles shows up. If you ask me, that seems like a really strange place for Charles Fairchild to be in the middle of the night. Okay? That's all I'm gonna say. There is something suspicious about Charles freaking Fairchild. Okay. That's all I got. That's all the notes that I wrote down. This is gonna be really long. I was trying to make it as clear and concise as possible, but I wanted to get every little detail so that you are as prepared as you can possibly be to go into Chain of Iron. That is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time with another video. Bye.